Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to our event today. We are discussing Ramadan on campus for higher education professionals, being inclusive of their Muslim students, staff, and community members and families. Welcome, 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 whether you're watching live or later on the recording. My name is Rahimeh Ramezany. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion, and intercultural practitioner, helping organizations include Muslims and religious identity in their DI programs. And with that, I will also pass on to my other respected, esteemed, awesome panelists, co-panelists, that I'm so grateful and honored to be sharing space with them. Dr. Mohammed Ahmed, if you would like to introduce yourself next.
Yeah, good morning and afternoon to everyone. My name is Dr. Mohammed Ahmed, and I serve as the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging at Alliant International University. And I'm glad to be part of this program today.
Awesome, amazing. Jamal, please go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jamal Rasuli. I am the CEO and founder of the Halal Shack. The Halal Shack specializes in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern food options within the C&U space. We have been pioneering the industry for almost 5 years by providing diverse and inclusive options on college campuses across the country.
Amazing. Thank you, Jamal, so much. Dr. Sadaf, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Dr. Sadaf Shire. I work at University of St. Thomas in Minnesota as Muslim chaplain, and I also teach first-year experience courses.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. Before we get started in our panel questions and how higher education professionals, both Muslim and non-Muslim, can be inclusive of their Muslim students and staff members, let's learn a little bit about what Ramadan is, the background of it, before we get into those strategies. So with that, I will pass it to Dr. Ahmed, who's going to do an amazing presentation for us.
All right, so good morning and afternoon, depending on where you're at. Welcome to our program today. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of what Ramadan is and some key best practices to support students, staff, and faculty in higher education campuses. So, what is Ramadan? Ramadan is the month of fasting and worship observed by Muslims around the world. During the month of Ramadan, many Muslims abstain from food and drink, including water as well, from dawn until sunset. Muslims consider the month of Ramadan as one of the key pillars of their faith. Muslims typically eat a meal before dawn, and then they break their fast immediately after sunset with a meal called iftar. And iftar means the breaking of the fast. A few hours after the meal, many Muslims around the world also attend congregational prayers and additional acts of worship. So the month of Ramadan is a very important month for Muslims to engage in their faith, in their spirituality, in a much more deeper way than the rest of the year. So you have a lot of prayers throughout the night. It is also the month where the Holy Quran, which is the book that Muslims follow and read and memorize, was revealed to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Ramadan for this year, obviously Ramadan begins with the sighting of the new moon for the month. For this year, 2023, it is expected to be around March 22nd or 23rd, and ends around April 21st and the 22nd. So give or take about a day. Depending on where you're at, particularly here in the U.S., you could be fasting from 14 and a half hours to 16 and a half hours. In some parts of the world, it could be longer, it could be shorter, but typically fast starts around sunset, so around 5:30 a.m., and Muslims get to break their fast around 7:15, 7:30. It really depends on where in the world you're at and when the sun goes down. So, how does the month of Ramadan impact students in higher education? Students will endeavor to balance their academic obligations, including studying, doing research, and working as well, while observing their religious obligations, such as fasting and attending evening prayers. With long days and rigorous schedules and limited time to rest at night, Ramadan is often an intensive experience for Muslim students. Around 4 p.m. And in the evening, especially when students have evening classes, for example, students have not eaten or drank anything for about 12 hours, if not more. So students are really impacted by fatigue in many different ways. Students might also, be in class during their time of the breaking of the fast, so during iftar time. So common, student concerns during Ramadan include conflicts around when breaking their fast. There might be in class. Exam accommodations, we'll talk a little bit about that. Students typically have, lower level of energies while they're fasting, and the lack of sometimes, the instructor or the faculty's awareness of what the month of Ramadan might entail. So what can we do to support students? One, let students know on your syllabus at the beginning of the semester that you are aware that some in the class may be fasting for Ramadan. So it's a good practice for faculty to have some sort of diversity statement, or to have, access to a religious holidays calendar that might be provided by the university or the institution. So students could feel, belonging in the class, that their faculty member knows that when it comes to Ramadan, that they might expect, students to have, ask for accommodations, might give breaks during, the sunset if there are any students that are observing Ramadan. So this really goes around by, signaling awareness, which could go a really long way for students to feel comfortable and ask for accommodations, particularly in a climate, a growing climate where Muslim students are feeling really impacted by the rise of Islamophobia and misinformation about Muslim community and Muslim students. What could we also do for students? Accommodate. Students have a different threshold. Some students are really dealing with fatigue, for example, especially when Ramadan comes around, the end of the semester, where there's a lot of exams, a lot of papers, a lot of assignments that are due. And some students could also have energy during the month of Ramadan, and they're feeling, okay, fasting and not able to eat and drink and still getting their work done. So some students might prefer taking exams earlier in the day, while others are prepared, to take exams after they have broken their fast. So faculty and students should really work together to find, the best solution for each instance. And there is also a sense of responsibility for students as well, to let faculty know ahead of time that I am not able to, take this exam on this day because, I'm observing Ramadan. I would like to have some sort of, give your faculty or instructor an idea of what type of accommodations you would like ahead of time, so they could plan accordingly. Now let's talk about faculty and staff. So when higher education institutions typically, look at how to accommodate students through religious obligations or cultural holidays, they tend to forget faculty and staff that could come from that faith background as well. So Muslim staff and faculty members may wish to request slight adjustments to their work day during Ramadan. So you might have some faculty who say, I would like to teach remotely, for this month as I am observing Ramadan. So if you're a dean, if you're a program director, you should be, considerate in looking at some ways to accommodate faculty and staff as well. For example, some Muslim students, staff, and faculty may wish to start earlier in the morning, or have a shorter lunch break so they can finish early. During the month of Ramadan, it's a lot of family engagements as well, preparing meals for the, for the iftar, or when the sun goes down and it's time for Muslims to break fast. So a lot of members of the Muslim community want to conserve their energy as much as they can, so they could also attend night prayers and other religious obligations during the month of Ramadan. In some cases, staff and faculty might like to work from home, for some of the week to help maintain their own energy levels. And I kind of already went over that. So given that we've seen that, during the pandemic, that it's for some people, it really works for them to work online, and they're really not needed as much as other staff or critical positions to be present on campus. So wherever that there could be accommodations, particularly for the month of Ramadan and other religious holidays as well, for other faith communities, would be a great a sense of inclusion for faculty, staff, and students. Some of the Muslim staffs and faculty members may also endeavor to practice their faith more during the month of Ramadan. So because of this, Muslim staff and faculty might wish to perform prayers, during the day. So taking some time off to step aside and for an individual to perform their daily requirement prayers is going to be very important. And also, providing a space for faculty, staff, and students to have a safe space where they could perform their religious obligations, including prayer, is going to be critical. And I'll touch upon that a little bit later on. And also, it is considered to avoid scheduling staff and faculty social activities or working lunches during the month of Ramadan, particularly if you have members of the Muslim community on your team who are observing Ramadan. So they don't feel like they're left out, so they're not in a banquet hall, engaging or being required to be around individuals that are eating while they're not able to eat or drink. It could be difficult for some faculty and staff. So looking at, for the university to create some sort of a inclusive religious holidays calendar, so university planning overall and department planning could be centered around how do we accommodate our staff, faculty, and students who might be observing different religious obligations. And lastly, I wanted to share some other additional support structures to support Muslim students, staff, and faculty. Number one, representation is critical and it's important, particularly if you are a university that has a large Muslim student population or a growing Muslim student population. It is important that community and any other community could really see themselves in part of the university leadership. So having Muslim administrators is critical and could really position the university to help increase its inclusive excellence mission. Mentorship also is very important. Oftentimes, Muslim students may not feel that they have someone at the university outside of faculty that might be teaching in particular courses like, either Islamic studies or Arabic. We need more faculty that could come from, diverse backgrounds. So students, regardless of what cultural background or religious background that you can come from, could have some sort of mentorship opportunities with professional staff. Second one is establishing what I like to call a mind, body, and spirit room. This is critical because particularly if you're a public institution, you cannot call, a space a Islamic prayer room or Jewish prayer room or any other, faith community prayer room. So in many cases, many institutions call it mind, body, and spirit room. They call it, meditation room, whatever you call it. But the important thing is that Muslim students are oftentimes praying behind stairwells, on the corner of the library, in the middle of a hallway, sometimes in a parking lot, and they could be vulnerable to hate crime attacks, and they could be vulnerable to a lot of dangerous potential things that could happen to them. So creating a space for them where they could go in and they could perform their prayers, their religious obligations in a very safe environment is critical. And we're seeing more and more institutions that are able to do that. Also, improving campus climate and safety is critical. There is a sharp rise of hate towards minority communities all across the country. And some of these, hate and domestic extremist ideologies tend to manifest itself on college campuses as well. So Islamophobia is on the rise, and it's a real threat and impact for Muslim students as well. So encouraging colleges and universities to be mindful of ways to improve campus safety for Muslim students and all students altogether, but really focusing on minority students that come from minority background, religious backgrounds, particularly Jewish students, Muslim students, and how we could create a more equitable and safe campus for them. Another example is building strong community relations and partnerships. There are so many organizations, other institutions within the larger community that the universities could serves that could be a strong partnership for the university. For example, there are many institutions that host Ramadan iftars for the entire university. And they do that in partnership, for example, with a local mosque. Sometimes they reach out to Muslim civil rights organizations to come onto campus and provide training and engagement on public safety and how to support Muslim students. And that is a great example of ways that the university could understand its various different student populations, the demographics that they come from, and who could represent them in the larger community as well. And lastly, establishing halal food options is critical. I can tell you that as a Muslim student not too long ago, especially during my undergrad, I had a difficult time finding access to halal food on campus. And oftentimes Muslim students would either have to bring food from home or they would have to go off campus. And that has an impact on student success, particularly when students are hungry in the classroom. They are not able to learn effectively as they should. And we have, Jamal with us today who could shed some light on what halal food is and the amazing stuff that the Halal Shack is doing in higher education campuses. So it is critical for universities to look at how to be more inclusive, particularly when it comes to dietary restrictions, whether it's kosher food, whether it's halal food, whether it's vegan options, whatever the case might be. Food insecurity is a critical thing for minority communities. And for universities to be inclusive on that end will definitely have a positive impact on student success. So I will leave it at that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I hope it's very helpful to set up our conversation going forward. With that, we're going to transition into our panel to hear from the other speakers. Our first question is, in each of our work, we work in different segments with different Muslim populations. What are some challenges that we've seen and also we've experienced as Muslims ourselves that Muslim students have during Ramadan, and how can higher education institutions address these issues in addition to everything that Dr. Ahmed already mentioned? So Dr. Sadaf, if you want to go first.
Yeah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Sayyidi ya Rasulallah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Sayyidi ya Habiballah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak on this very important topic. A wonderful presentation, Dr. Ahmed. A couple of things that I would like to add. Really, the most important thing is creating this awareness at institutional level that supporting Muslim students is not an act of charity. It's their constitutional right. So creating that awareness that when we are going as an ally and asking people to support Muslim students or those poor refugees or those poor immigrants or those poor people of color, what that does is that people come to do an act of charity. With that comes a sense of giving, that brings a sense of pride and arrogance, and then sense of exhaustion. For how long are we going to support them, right? They are a burden on us, which we are not. So creating this awareness that this is their constitutionally protected right, and if we do not support them, if we do not provide religiously relevant accommodations to our Muslim students within universities, we are failing in in our commitment to our constitutional obligations. That's the most important thing. An average Muslim student on a college campus is protected under different, under Civil Rights of 1964. A Muslim student, majority of them are people of color, are either immigrant or refugee or children of immigrant and refugee, are because of their gender, because of their national origin, and because of their language. They come under various protected classes, and it's important for universities to understand that if we do not support them, then we are violating Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is important to understand that the overall demographics of the U.S. is changing. For example, in Minnesota, Muslims in next 25 years, 25% of our higher education institutes will have Muslims as their student population. So Muslims will be the 25% of higher education institutes. And if we are not taking care of that significant population, we are not fulfilling our DEI commitments. So understanding the demographic shifts as well. It is also very important to know that providing religiously relevant accommodations is a thing that's happening in most higher education institutions in the U.S. I'm currently doing a study, and according to my understanding, a large number of U.S. institutions, they have Muslim prayer room. Not just a multi-faith prayer room, a Muslim prayer room. And they have those prayer rooms in their student unions or in very busy and very visible spaces on campus. So it's really important to provide those kind of spaces. It's also really important to provide religious literacy and awareness to our faculty and staff and administration. So for example, during Ramadan, before Ramadan comes, this is how we start at University of St. Thomas. At least 6 months before Ramadan starts, we start doing those little workshops, or like go to faculty meetings and then speak there for 15 minutes. Develop those kind of connections, build allyship, and develop that kind of sense that Ramadan is coming, Muslim students are there, and we cannot expect them to pick and choose between religion and education. We cannot expect them to shed parts of their identity outside classroom, outside university, and be something else in school and something else outside. That's not fair. That negatively impacts. There's a large body of research that says if we push students towards that direction, where they have lower self-esteem, lower respect for their identity, where their sense of self is hurt, their academic trajectory is hurt. So we need to not just look at Muslims, coming back to where I started, Muslim and other religious minorities, not just look at them, those, charity cases. No, that's a very wrong idea. We need to look at them as partners, as allies, as citizens who have equal rights. And if we are not protecting their rights, we are not fulfilling our constitutional obligation. Thank you.
Very, very well said. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Sadaf. Oh, Dr. Ahmed, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Dr. Sadaf has done a great job in looking at the legislations that impact higher education campuses to really support students from a religious perspective. I just also wanted to add some of the Muslim community is a very large and broad community. And we can't put them all in the same bucket. For example, a challenge is for Muslim international students, and we tend to see a lot that are coming from different parts of the world, whether it's Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and around the world. And the challenges that they have during the month of Ramadan is vastly different than domestic Muslim students. Because if you're a domestic Muslim student, probably you have a family that you could go home, in the evening and have an iftar with, break the fast with. But for these Muslim international students, they might live on campus. They might not have access to transportation where they're, have to go off campus to go to a restaurant to break their fast. So it is so important for, dining services to have restaurants that are at least open late hours for those particular Muslim students that may not have the capacity and the transportation to do that. Some of them may not have access to cook their own food. So it's also important to have halal food options available for students on campus as well. I also look at how institutions could be proactive and not sort of be unaware of, when major religious holidays are coming, whether it's Ramadan, Hanukkah, and so they could prepare their faculty, their instructors, that when a student does reach out, it's really not acceptable for you to say, nope, there's no other option. You're going to have to take this exam, right? Especially sometimes Ramadan comes during final seasons. And if you did not eat or drink for more than 12 hours, you are not, you're not probably going to be okay in taking multiple exams, during, the day. So that accommodations are critical. They're important. And, I would also like to, talk a little bit about how this impacts, sort of the campus, how they celebrate different holidays. When you come to campus, and you might kind of see this a little more in the K through 12 setting, but if it's Halloween, the entire university is dedicated with Halloween themes. Same thing with Christmas, same thing with other, mainstream holidays. And for the month of Ramadan, and you have more than 1.9 billion followers, it's okay to have some sort of Islamic decoration and symbols around different offices or around campus community. It's just another way for students to feel that they have belonging and they could be included in the larger campus community as well. And lastly, sending out a message is so important. For university leadership, whether you're the chief diversity officer, whether you're the provost, the president, a message going out to the university community and acknowledging not only Ramadan, but all other important, traditions for various different communities that we are aware. And if you need accommodations, we are here to support you in these accommodations. And we wish you a happy, safe Ramadan, Hanukkah, X, Y, and Z. That goes a long way for a student to say, my university or my institution really cares about me.
Thank you. Yes. Jamal, please, what is your thoughts on the challenges that Muslim students face, both for yourself working with Muslim students and providing halal food for them, and also for yourself as your own experience?
Yeah, I think that everything that was mentioned provided a good solution in an attempt to approach something that hasn't been solved yet. So I would say the challenges that are on campuses are pretty much everything that we're talking about solutions for. Some of the things that we see on campuses often is, to what Dr. Muhammad Ahmad said, the students don't have an opportunity to find halal options during iftar. For example, if it's a large commuter campus, a lot of the retail dining may close, and then the resident dining program in the evening hours won't be as strong as lunch hours, which kind of creates a inequity in their diversity for dining. And then also suhoor times. I think that on a lot of college campuses, we provide guidance and support on how to provide the right meals during suhoor. A couple programs, we work on 32 universities across the country, but our restaurants are a retail dining option. They're not a solution for halal food on an entire campus through a resident program, but we provide guidance and support on how do you make suhoor or iftar approachable. And I think that a lot of the universities that we work with are doing a good job on trying to find ways to make suhoor nutritious, where you don't give them something that's filled with a lot of sugar and doesn't have the right content of nutrients that they'll need to last them throughout the entire day. And I like what we're talking about here, because it's an approach which shines a flashlight with more awareness. And I think that that's the best first step, because what I find, and this is the biggest thing, is a lack of awareness or a lack of understanding of what Ramadan is and what to do for Muslims during Ramadan. I think that as Muslims in America, we are still not given the type of attention around Ramadan as we should. So I think that by putting more literature and education out there, it will make it more digestible and approachable for people.
Thank you so much, all. Honestly, you've covered everything. I don't have anything I want to, I feel like would be constructive to add, so I will move us to our next question. Next question, question number 2, non-Christian religious holidays, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned already as well. Non-Christian religious holidays seasons also come with a rise of bigotry and hate directed at the associated faith community. In your experiences, all of our different experiences, how does Islamophobia impact Muslim communities and students during Ramadan specifically? And I just learned that today is also the UN commemoration of Islamophobia, so this very much ties into that as well. What preventative actions can higher institutions, specifically higher education institutions, take specifically? Dr. Ahmed, would you like to go first?
Yeah. So the rise of Islamophobia and all forms of hate is a real thing, and it's no joke, and the impact is real. I've was part of an institution where multiple Muslim students were attacked because of their religious background, and some of our sisters had their hijab, pulled off, and other campuses are really stuck on what is the difference between hate speech and free speech. So this is definitely an impact. I think college and university campuses really need to focus on understanding what are the forms of the various different forms of domestic extremism and these ideologies. How do they impact their particular campus? Why are Muslim students, why are Jewish students, why are, African American students vulnerable to these hate? So there has to be a zero tolerance for the university around that. But how do you get to that? You need to educate your community on these dangerous ideologies and understand what are some prevention and intervention methods that could work for that particular institution. So the more awareness and the more safety measures that campuses take, whether it's more lighting, whether it's more camera systems, whether it's having more a presence of campus security, all of those things are critical. Active shooter training is also very important for the university in general. We are seeing more and more, school shootings. So that in that front, I think universities tend to see this as a law enforcement issue. But I can tell you, as someone who is an expert in combating domestic extremism, by the time he gets to law enforcement, it's already too late. And the law enforcement job is going to be respond to remove a threat. So looking and educating your university leadership on how to identify red flags, right? If someone says something hateful, they should be dealt with. They should be condemned, right? And I also want to call out the hypocrisy and the double standards. For example, if someone says something that is homophobic, anti-Semitic, anti-Black, they're probably thrown out. There's campus messages that go out, and the the university or college rallies together. And if you make those hateful statements, you should be thrown out. Absolutely. Without a doubt, no community should be dealing with hate. But it seems nowadays that when it comes to Islamophobia, we get into the debate of this is academic freedom. this is a freedom of speech issue. And that is a real concern for the Muslim community. It is not okay to be Islamophobic. It is not okay to call violence towards Muslim communities. It is not okay to use blasphemy towards religious figures, including the Prophet. It's not okay to draw the Prophet. It is so offensive to the Muslim community all around the world. So all of those issues that, the university leadership need to be aware on how to be more inclusive and not really only support certain communities while leaving other communities behind.
Yes, all of that. Dr. Sadaf, please, what else would you have to add?
Well, as Dr. Ahmed says, that when these things reach law enforcement, it's already too late, and we don't want to wait until then. School is a safe space, and it should remain a safe space, not just in terms of like physical violence, direct violence, but also in terms of sensitivities, emotion, creating a culture of respect for everyone. Respect everyone every day. So that can be done by building bridges of trust. Muslim students, whether it's a private school or a public school, whether it is religiously affiliated, non-religiously affiliated, it's important that Muslim students have access to the administration, top administration. They feel comfortable speaking with them. Because it's one thing to have an active act of Islamophobia, particularly like direct violence, physical violence. It's also, and so I want our audience to understand that if an act of Islamophobia happens on a person, on a Muslim person, they are impacted. It's not just that they are impacted. The vibe goes through. Everyone gets impacted at different levels. The fear is there. So when students see that they have those allies in university, they are being heard and listened to, that reduces that fear. When the university administration sends university-wide message, Ramadan Kareem, when we post those, like you can see in my back, there are those Happy Ramadan signs. We are going to install them different places on campus to create that vibe. What does that do? That creates a sense of legitimation. That my religion is legitimate as anyone else's, and it's okay to be Muslim. I don't have to hide it. I don't need to be afraid of it. Then it's also important for example, from campus ministry, we are sending boxes of dates to our Muslim students before Ramadan starts. So it's like just sending a message, right? So those kinds of things are really, really important for us to do. Faculty and staff, building that relationship, especially with students of minority religion, minority cultural and religious background, different students of different races, so that when that strong culture is present of respect and love, acts of Islamophobia and xenophobia will be discouraged by themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. This is all so powerful. Thank you. For Jamal specifically, shifting away from Islamophobia to, as his expertise is in halal food, what is the importance for college students of having access to halal food during Ramadan?
It's everything. I think that for those who oblige by the dietary restrictions, placed on them through their religious observance, they should have equal access to those who don't have that dietary restriction. So especially whether it's Ramadan or not Ramadan, we believe that we have to have inclusion in food options across all CNU, all college and university. So it's not something that's a negotiable. And When we started our company, our mission was to bridge the gap between culture and people using food, and using our supply chain as well as our knowledge of the halal standards that we need to oblige by in a space where halal food is not prevalent. So,
Absolutely. Thank you all. Okay, moving us on to our last question. What can non-Muslim specific higher education professionals do to make this Ramadan on their campuses truly inclusive? Wrapping up our conversation, they're walking away, active steps that they can take. Right now, we're like a week away from the start of Ramadan, keeping that in mind compared to things that they could have done a month, 2 months in advance. So, of course, Ramadan is coming next year, so you can absolutely keep these in mind for next year as well. What is something a week out that non-Muslim higher education professionals, professors, admin, leadership, all of the things can do to make their campuses inclusive for their Muslim students and, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, staff members as well. Dr. Sadaf, if you would like to go first.
Sure, I can speak a little bit about that. So first of all, it's really important that when we host Ramadan events on campus, our administration, our staff, and our faculty, non-Muslim administration staff and faculty, they come and attend so that they are with Muslims, so that our Muslim students feel that, well, they are celebrating with us. We are part of the university. It's also important, for example, for faculty, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, have a statement in the syllabus outline. For faculty to announce at the beginning of the semester, because there's power dynamics. It is really difficult for students in certain cases to go and speak to the faculty and explain themselves, explain the entire dynamics of Ramadan. That is really difficult. So in order we can never flatten that hierarchy, power dynamics, but still to neutralize it as much as we can, it's important for faculty to announce in the class, Ramadan is coming, that's Muslims' holy month. And if there are students who would like to get reasonable religious accommodation during Ramadan, please reach out to me during the first 2 or 3 weeks of Ramadan. Also, in order to make those conversations easy, for example, in our university, we send out Ramadan accommodation forms or templates that students can customize according to their needs, fill them in, and send out to faculty to facilitate that kind of conversation, so that faculty knows, or staff supervisor knows, or athletic supervisors, coaches know that this particular student needs this kind of accommodation during Ramadan. These are some of the very important things that we need to do during Ramadan, especially and overall too. Be with your students, speak with them, talk to them at human level, try to understand them. Awad Ibrahim, he has this wonderful approach. He says it, hang out with your students. I know it's very difficult to take time out of our busy schedules, but once in a while, hang out with your Jewish students, hang out with your Muslim student. Just over a cup of coffee, talk to them. What it is to be like a Muslim, what it is to be like a Jewish. What can we do for you? Make them part of decision making. Don't make decisions for them. Invite them to be part of those decision makings so that they feel included, they have a trust. Sometimes it's more important to understand that a process is going on than to have the outcome, the end result. So just know that our Muslim, our Jewish, and other students from non-Christian background, they're wise, they're intelligent people, they're capable, and they can be with us and they can help us make our campuses more inclusive, equitable, diverse, and prosperous. Thank you.
I love that. Especially nothing about us without us. That's something that's really key. Even if you learn about Ramadan, Muslim inclusion, Ramadan, like in any identity group, any religious group or non-religious group, like don't learn about it from an article, a video, a live stream, and then say, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do to be inclusive, boom, 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 and then just apply that without actually checking in with the human beings that are your students, that are your coworkers, that are in your life, because they might be different and they might prefer something else, right? So you have to build that rapport and that relationship. I love that so much. Thank you. Jamal, would you like to go next?
No, I think that Sister Shear said it perfectly. I think that building that authentic and genuine connection is everything. Creating awareness and education, and one of my most favorite things about Islam is the beauty and the peace that Islam teaches us. So, kind of raising awareness about that with our colleagues. I think you said the best.
I love it. Awesome, Dr. Ahmed. Please wrap it up for us. Oh, you are on mute.
All right, how about now? Okay, there we go. I would say be intentional when you're reaching out, and be sincere. When I sent out a Ramadan message along with a guide to our university, I had, quite a few people that reached out. And one example is one faculty member who's been with the institution for 23 years and said, all of my 23 years, this is the first time I've received a Ramadan message. Oftentimes for years and years, she went without breaking her fast because the time that she would be teaching would be, during the evening. So, and she would miss all of these, night prayers. So being intentional is critical. And also understanding what Ramadan is. You don't have to be an expert, but what it means to students. And that really helps a professional staff member at the institution be more conscious of how they engage in conversations. Inclusive language means a lot. When a student says, I'm fasting, don't say, oh, I'm so sorry that you're fasting, right? Oftentimes, students might feel offended. It's a sense of pride for Muslim students, staff, and faculty. It's a spiritual rejuvenation for them. They're happy that for example, I don't know a Muslim that is not excited, can't wait until Ramadan comes. So don't use terminology like that. Another common thing is, well, if you can't eat, well, have some water, right? So we know that fasting traditions across various different faiths could be practiced differently. But from the Islamic perspective, it typically means no food, no water. And also, I've seen some of our sisters who are in many ways are not required to fast during different times of the week or the month, and I've seen staff members who say, "Why are you not fasting?" Right? So being a little bit more educated and all of this information is relatively online. So being intentional with your engagement is critical, and I would leave it also by saying that accommodations are not they're just not something that students are asked for. It is students have a right to. And I've come across so much faculty that I had to reach out to and let them know that they should accommodate. The student has a right to accommodate. And these accommodations are not unrealistic. They're quite reasonable. Being also engaged in that perspective, especially with faculty relations, are going to be critical. And lastly, we could support students, during the month of Ramadan, but support does not end there. It is a continuous support structure that the university, in a very important way, is looking at minority students or underserved students, not only through the same lens, but working with each particular demographic of students and saying, what is important to you? For Muslim students, is having a foot wash in the bathroom so they could wash up and to make prayer. It is access to a prayer room. It could be so simple as removing books in the library Islamic section that have nothing to do with Islam, that are geopolitical, focused. We've seen that. It is access to halal food. And I can't thank Jamal more than enough. When I was at San Diego State, our Muslim students did not have access to halal food. And we had a 2-track system where we actually went through the ingredients and created halal options with the sticker, with the green famous sticker that says halal. And that would be available to students at, stores, like convenience stores that are available, or markets on the campus. But then we found this company called Halal Shack that operates particularly in higher education campuses, and that has lifted the burden off of Muslim students. And let me just say, not only Muslim students, our Jewish students, our vegan students. It just like sort of the terminology, not, 2 birds with 1 stone. And I could say it's the most popular food option at San Diego State. It's very delicious as well. So maybe I turn it back to Jamal. How can higher education institutions could reach out to, what does the process look like in terms of Halal Shack joining their campus community?
So as far as Halal Shack, our brand goes, we work with in the CNU space, and the simple truth is they can reach out to me. I can work with them on that. But I would say, like, to kind of talk a little bit more about not just Halal Shack, but how do we make halal food not a diversity option, but more an inclusive option. And I think that there's a lot of colleges out there that are doing the right thing by providing halal standards and upholding halal standards and purchasing halal meat only. So I think that education is something that all colleges, hospitals, and airports, basically any public domain, will eventually have to go toward. I think, Mohammed, as you were mentioning, 1.9 billion Muslims, and I think with it 25% of college demographics going to be is Muslim, or will be Muslim in the near future. So the point I'm making is that this is going to be something that in the very near future will be a top priority for lots of public domain spaces. And the best thing that we can do is provide education. I think that there's a lot of governing bodies out there that can make it harder or easier for universities to serve halal food. So I think by providing just an open arm relationship of education, it's really important. They can work with brands like the Halal Shack, which we serve. We have a couple other brands, but we're retail brands, and all of our food is halal. A retail brand is something like a Starbucks or Chipotle, where you go there and you purchase it. But I think that's one solution. Another solution that has to happen is the resident dining front, which is the programs where people live on campus 24/7. They need to have, equally an unlimited amount of halal options that's equivalent to what the non-halal options are. And so I think overall the goal is through education and through working subject matter experts like ourselves over here.
Can I quickly add something here, if that's okay? So there are a few things. There's a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding. And I really believe in good nature of our administration and our staff and our faculty. They all want to support our students. It's just that a lot of the time we don't know. And because we don't know, that empathy falls apart. It's important to know what does it mean for a Muslim student on a university campus, living on a university campus, and not being able to eat halal food. So I met with a student athlete in a school, in a university, and he said that he lost 5 kg muscle mass during Ramadan because the iftar that was provided to him was not halal, but the vegetarian options that he had were not good enough, were not filling. There, as a Muslim person, when I go to a place, let's forget university campus for a while. I go to a place to an event and I have to peek into every single dish. Is it something that I can eat? I have to read the label. Is it something that I can eat? I become a spectacle there. I just become like, people look at me. And I'm blocking the line and I have to go explain people, can you please change your gloves? Can you use different gloves? Can you use clean knife? It just takes a lot of courage. For an 18 years old or 19 years old who comes to a university campus, for them it's a huge deal to go and explain themselves to people helping them, servers at the residence hall, and tell, can you change your gloves? Can you clean your knife? Can you not do my sandwich on the same grill where you're doing non-halal food? It's just a lot of, it's taxing. So what happens is, several Muslim students, then they start compromising on their food, on their religion. And I name that as forced assimilation. We desensitize our Muslim students' sensibilities towards their religiously relevant food needs. So whichever company that you work with, I don't care. The tuition dollar that a Muslim student pays is the same as the tuition dollars that a non-Muslim student pays, a Christian student pays. Muslim students should get the same kind of food on college campus that anyone else get, the same quality. They don't have to go through that grueling experience of explaining themselves every day. You can work with whichever food provider, supplier, whichever company you want to. But just understand that if we are putting students every day into that experience, either they are going to give up their faith under that circumstances that are forcing them to assimilate, or they come out of that school with a very difficult experience of 4 years telling them 3 times a day, you don't belong here. This is not your space to be. We are, no matter how much we say day in and out, we are inclusive. We are equitable. We are not unless our actions speak for it. Our dining houses in university campuses are a living example of that. They are testimony of the fact that we are not inclusive. This is not the space for non-Muslim students, non-Christian students, or Muslim minorities, Jewish minorities, unless we provide them that support. Thank you.
Jamal, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say I couldn't agree with that more. I think that what Sister Sheer was referring to, I refer to as microaggressions. I think that there's an undertone of so many microaggressions in the CNU space. And one thing that, as a Muslim American, when I was going to college, I went through a lot of what Sister Sheer is talking about, and that's what motivated me to, when I had an opportunity to start the concept, was to make sure that everything was halal, but to the extent of putting all of our ingredients and our halal certificates right on our front line, because I actually went through that when I would feel like honestly terrible every time I would ask the same person, hey, can you change your gloves or can you do this? It made me not want to eat there. So when I had a chance to open up a concept, I made sure that we were inclusive of all that. But now we share that with universities for free. So we actively publish our halal, or it's not our halal standards, but the halal standards, and we make it look marketable, as well as publishing different allergen disclosures and what halal certificates mean. Because I think there's also a lot of noise in the industry about, what type of halal certificate do you have, what the governing body is, and then is it zabiha or is it mechanical? And I think that all of that, just, we need to have all hands out and we need to be more inclusive. So I really love what the sister said.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh my gosh, all of this. And honestly, like, when you mentioned the gloves, like, I got triggered a bit because that resonates so much. oh, I really want to eat this food, and oh, can you just please, like, trying to, like, for myself, the way I interpreted it and, like, acted it out was like making myself as small as humanly possible, and like I'm a woman, so also playing like the nice, sweet, like, oh please, oh poor me, like, can you please help me, and like just desperately not wanting them to like glare at me like, oh my god, you're so like annoying, or I'm just doing my job, why are you, like, you're doing the most here, like it really doesn't, like, just that look in their eye. The one restaurant, this doesn't necessarily have to do with higher education, but I just want to shout out Chipotle of all places. Every single time I have ever gone to a Chipotle specifically, and I asked their employees to change their gloves, every single branch, every single time I have ever done that, the employees immediately take off their gloves, never have flinched at me, never looked at me weird. They wash their hands with soap. They do it. No questions asked. I'm so grateful. And that's like just the norm of like, I'm not trying to make your life harder. Like, this is something that's important to me, and all the things. So like just the gloves comment really resonated with me a lot. And something that Dr. Ahmed was saying earlier around like, forgive me, this is a few minutes back in our conversation, but it just really struck with me, and I wanted to like put in my 2 cents as well about it, is the idea of like non-Muslims feeling that when a lot of non-Muslims, when they first learn about Ramadan, and especially around fasting, because of course there are so many spiritual elements to Ramadan that have nothing to do with fasting. There are many folks who, for religious reasons, don't have to fast. There are non-practicing Muslims who don't fast, but they might practice and try and participate and rejuvenate their faith in other ways, and that is all completely legitimate. But for non-Muslims, most of the time when you interact with a Muslim participating in Ramadan, like fasting is going to be the thing that stands out to you in your interaction with them. You're not like, they're not going to come and talk to you about like, hey, I'm doing these special prayers at my mosque at like 10 p.m. at night. Like, that's a totally different thing, right? So with the emphasis on fasting, again, the non-Muslims who first start learning about Ramadan, a lot of the times it is very common, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, to like, oh my gosh, oh, you poor thing, I'm so sorry for you. I could never, what? Like, it's just this like shock, but just pity, and like such a bizarre, uncivilized practice of like, but then you see fasting in other settings, especially secular settings, like in the last number of years, intermittent fasting has become very popular, and yet that is very similar in a lot of ways. Not completely, other faiths do things differently, so, I'm not trying to say it's the same thing, but it seems okay when non-Muslims do a certain thing, but when a Muslim does it because of their faith, and don't use like quote-unquote science, the newest science research that's come out that proves that this was right all along, that honestly, that goes on for so many religious practices, not just for Muslims, but for other religions as well. I could go on forever about that, but someone recently mentioned to me, asking about using an ice cube. Like, oh, you're fasting? Like, oh, can you suck on an ice cube to like help with your dry mouth? And I'm like, no, that's not, like, that's not where that goes. But the same thing also with the holiday at the end of Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr. It's not a celebration of like, yay, it's over, we're free, thank God, like, we're done, we can't wait, we've been counting down the hours till we're free of this month. Not at all. The energy for Ramadan, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, as Jamal has mentioned, as Dr. Sadaf has mentioned, Muslims very much overwhelmingly look forward to Ramadan, are sad to see Ramadan over. Eid al-Fitr at the end of the month is a holiday where, yes, we're commemorating, we're celebrating, but in a positive, we're so happy we did this, we're happy we were able to experience this and participate in whatever way we are able to, whether we can go to the mosque, whether we are able to go and fast, whether we are giving in charity, whether financially or in our actions, on and on and on, whatever that is, just being so happy that we were able to participate, and very much looking forward to next year. Ramadan is a very family-oriented time, a very community-oriented time, and on. So with all of that, I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your time. I'm sure, I know I very much learned a lot from you all. Even as a Muslim doing this work, I always learn so much from other Muslims in this space. I know our audience is learning and has learned so much from you all. I am going to put links and bios for all of our different speakers in the description with this video. If you're watching the recording, please do check out their work, look into them. If you want to work with them, you can reach out. And with that, I wish you all well and Ramadan Mubarak.